Hi, this is Bob Fox. We've got something really special for you today. Come on with me. If you've ever been to the McCormick place in Chicago, maybe you've been to a boat show or a home show or a car show. But have you ever wondered for whom the McCormick place has been named? Well, contrary to popular opinion, it was not Cyrus McCormick, but Robert R. McCormick. And we're here today at his home in Cantigny. Hi! I'm Bob Fox, and I'm with Yesterday Today.
Nice to meet you. My name is Laura Evans. I'm the Director of Visitor Services here at Cantigny, here in Wheaton, Illinois.
Very good. Can you tell us a little bit about what happens here at this magnificent place?
Well, this is the Visitor Center here at Cantigny, and this is generally where, when you're entering Cantigny, this would be the first place that you would come, would be our Visitor Center. And it gives you an overview of what we have to offer here at Cantigny. The Visitor Center actually was the original site of Colonel McCormick's horse stables. And up until generally the early part of 1960s, it was also housed the 1st Division Museum until approximately 1993, and then now it is the Visitor Center. Within the Visitor Center, we have the gift shop, and we also have our new coffee shop, Birdie's, and our new restaurant, Le Jardin. We also have the Joseph Medill room, and Joseph Medill was the maternal grandfather of Colonel McCormick, who this estate originally belonged to. Here at Cantigny, we have over 500 acres made up of our golf courses, 27 holes of golf course, and our youth links, our new golf academy. We also have the Robert McCormick Museum, which is his home, that was built in 1896. Robert McCormick expanded it in 1932. We also have the 1st Infantry Division Museum, our military museum, and our military park has 13 tanks. We encourage everyone to come out here and they can stroll through the gardens. We have many programs that they can also be involved in, many educational programming that we have for not only families, but for children as well.
Well, here we are at the Robert R. McCormick Museum, and I have with me Mr. Will Bulig, who is the Assistant Director. Will, my name is Bob Fox. Can you tell us a little bit about the museum here?
Well, Bob, what you see in front of you is the Wheaton estate of Robert Rutherford McCormick, the editor and publisher of the Chicago Tribune. Now, this house was originally built back in 1896 by Robert McCormick's maternal grandfather, a man named Joseph Medill, who came to Chicago in 1855 and started working for the Chicago Daily Tribune. Now, the Tribune had been in existence since 1847. Joseph Medill came to Chicago and sort of really reinvented the entire business, really made it a very powerful and influential newspaper. Now, back in 1899, Medill decides to build a country retreat here in Wheaton, Illinois. And that was the original structure. Now, what we see right now is the result of a 1938 addition, renovation, oversaw by Medill's grandson, Robert Rutherford McCormick. Now, currently the house has 35 rooms, and a full tour of the house, you'll see 27 rooms of the building. Now, what we try to do thematically is give you an idea of what the house looked like after those 2 wings were completed back in 1938. So we're going to show you a mid-20th century interpreted house, which is very unique. What really makes it unique in that, believe it or not, the house has had air conditioning since 1938. So I think it's a fun fact when people come in and say, hey, the air conditioning you're feeling is historically accurate. But as you can imagine, Mr. McCormick was a very wealthy man, collected a lot of antiques, and the house is just filled with them. And we use those artifacts, those antiques, to tell the story of Robert McCormick, his life, legacy, and his impact even today in media, politics, and civic responsibility. More often, it was basically a place where Mr. McCormick would provide retreats for he and his friends. We know polo was played here. We know that fox hunting took place here. A lot of just general horseback riding took place here. And those are the outside activities that took place. Inside, you'd have dinner parties. We know he showed movies here. We have a movie theater in our basement where first-run motion pictures were very frequently shown. Perhaps our most famous guest was Charles Lindbergh.
Oh.
He and his wife Anne were actually on that second floor in 1948. So it was basically a show place for Robert to bring his friends and family. Symmetry is very prevalent here. And this, especially on the east and south, which we can't see from here, are all show the influence of his Virginia heritage.
Right.
Mr. McCormick was a member of the International Harvester McCormick. Cyrus McCormick was his great uncle, which came to Illinois from Virginia in the 1840s. So you see a lot of Virginia architecture elements throughout the house, both on the exterior and the interior. And his love of this property, this house, is why we're here today. He died in 1955. He was 74 years old. He was married twice, had no children, no direct heirs to give his fortune to. So what he did is he took that money, that fortune, those assets, and made what's now called the McCormick Foundation. And he wanted, through his will in 1955, wanted this house to become a historic house museum. And here we are 50 years after that, still doing the same thing that Mr. McCormick desired. Well, Bob, welcome to Mr. McCormick's library.
It's wonderful.
Now, this is the entire eastern wing of the house, and it was completed in 1936. And on the walls of this room, we see all members of the family. We're all very influential in Robert's life. Now, again, this room was a multi-purpose room. It sort of speaks to Mr. McCormick's personality. We have roughly 1,500 books in this room alone. So he was an avid reader. Robert himself published over 10 books in his lifetime. And we think that mostly what you see here is some source material for those books. Now, in addition to being a place of intellectual pursuit, this area also was Mr. McCormick's entertainment room. We have a 1936 Steinway & Son piano in this space. We also have Robert McCormick's hidden bar, which we'll see in a few seconds. So Robert utilized this space in many ways. And again, it speaks to Mr. McCormick's utilization of this property as a place to entertain and as a place to really escape the hustle and bustle of the city.
Now, I'm sure all our friends at home are going to want to know, where was this hidden bar?
Well, if you want to follow me, I'll show you where that is.
Very good, okay.
So follow me if you would. Opens by pushing two buttons you see here. And I've already partially opened it up, so I'm just going to hold the doors open the rest of the way. Robert was a Chicagoan. He was born in Chicago here in 1880. And he went to school at Yale, graduated law school here at Northwestern, but his true love was newspaper business. And in 1911, he got his opportunity to become publisher of the newspaper. And he stayed in that capacity all the way to his death in 1955. Now, in addition to having all of his time occupied by the Tribune administration, he also found time to volunteer his services in the military during World War I. And he was with the 1st Division, an artillery officer, and he got to lead a regiment in a place called Cantigny, France in 1918. And that's how we got our name. And we'll get an opportunity to learn more about Mr. McCormick's military experience at the 1st Division Museum, which we're going to see later on. And even in this room, we have some relics, some symbols, if you will, of Mr. McCormick's artillery experience in World War I.
That's where his interest lied, right?
Now, truth be known, these two artifacts were used as a symbolic start to a fox hunt. A lot of fox hunting here at Cantigny, and the firing of the cannons symbolized the release of the hounds, if you will, and these things would make a lot of noise, a lot of smoke, and the hounds would be released, and the official fox hunt would take place. If you come to Cantigny, you will park in our visitor center parking lot. If you step back in time to the 1940s and 50s, that space was Mr. McCormick's paved airstrip. And Mr. McCormick would fly back and forth to work. Now, this plane, the Sikorsky S-38, was utilized primarily before Meigs Field was completed in 1948. But that airstrip that we had here at Cantigny was around before Meigs Field. So you can imagine this plane taking off, heading east and landing on Lake Michigan. Where I understand that the plane would taxi into the Chicago River, and Tribune Tower is, of course, very close to the Chicago River. I understand there was a Tribune-owned dock that the plane would taxi into, and Mr. McCormick would get to work. Now, I don't know how long it would take with the amphibious plane, but once Meigs Field was built and he could utilize that airstrip, it took 12 minutes one way to commute. So that was the preferred way to travel. And that allowed him to come out here very frequently. And he did have a home on Astor Street here in Chicago, but if he had the time and the weather was right, he could fly himself out here. And one of the things that I really enjoy telling people about is this artifact we see in front of us. This was a television set. It dates from the early 1950s. It's a Stromberg Carlson brand television. And what you see on top of this television is something that's also very unique and very interesting, is the remote control for this device. It weighs about 10 pounds. There are about 8 wires that connect it to the television. Again, being the founder of WGN in 1948, you can sort of imagine Mr. McCormick playing WGN here in his room. Now, probably there were more than just one television in the house, but this is the only one that still remains from that original time period. And we know it was from Maryland's part of the house because of the Asian-inspired design of the cabinet. We have a lot of artwork and cabinetry and furniture from Asia, and that's all the influence of Marilyn the Second Wife. So this is another one of those things that we love to show people, to give people an idea of how modern a house this was in the 1950s. Right now we're in Mr. McCormick's sitting room, and next to Mr. McCormick's chaise lounge we have a very interesting artifact. Now, in addition to being the editor and publisher of the Chicago Tribune, Mr. McCormick also was the founder of WGN Radio and Television. And this device is a radio and phonograph player, and it was given to Mr. McCormick on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of the Tribune Company. And of course, it's tuned to WGN. We show it to visitors occasionally. But this is one of those artifacts that really allows us to tell a compelling story of Robert and his life and his legacy and his work. Well, Bob, let me show you the device that was used to deliver all that firewood to the house. It's a
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
You simply turn a key, and up from the basement comes a fresh supply of firewood for the house.
This is the 1st Division Museum, and we have with us today Mr. Mike Gooddale. Bob Fox. Mike, can you tell us a little bit about this magnificent building?
Sure. The museum is dedicated to the 1st Infantry Division, and the reason it's for the 1st Division is because Colonel McCormick was part of the 1st Division in World War I. He served with the 1st of the 5th Field Artillery Regiment at the Battle of Cantigny, which is what the estate is named for. And throughout the rest of his life, he was very involved with veterans and veterans affairs. And upon his death, one of the trustees of his estate came back to the board 2 years later and said, I think the colonel would have liked a museum dedicated to soldiers. And so that's how the museum got started. This is just a life-size mock-up of trenches. It's the iconic image of World War I. And so we tried to recreate it as closely as possible to give people the idea of what it's like to be living and existing in these trenches. As we continue further, we'll go into an underground bunker. The bunkers were typically 15, 20 meters underground. Just depends on how deep they wanted to dig. Right now we're standing in back alley of the village of Cantigny. The whole museum is set up on as environmental galleries. So we want to put people into the shoes of soldiers, sort of the way they experienced it at the time. So all of this was done from original photographs, so it's fairly accurate.
Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun. Johnny, show the Hun, you're a son of the gun. Hoist the flag and let her...
We know Robert McCormick was a veteran of World War I, but I see now that we've entered World War II. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, as I said, the museum is set up as the 1st Division Museum, and so we've tried to capture the entire history of that particular unit in the Army. It started in 1917 when divisions were first created to fight, and they've continued on to present day. And so we've tried to take the iconic image of each of those conflicts that the 1st Division has been involved in and sort of brought them to life here in the museum.
So I'm assuming we're going to move from World War II into...
We will go from World War II, we'll go to the Cold War. We don't have anything on the Korean conflict, and that's because the 1st Division didn't fight in Korea. But they were on duty in Germany as sort of as a deterrent force to Soviet aggression. Then we'll go over to Vietnam. We'll spend a little time in the jungle, and then we'll get to our final gallery, which is Desert Shield and Desert Storm.
Very good. Let's do that.
Absolutely.
We finally hit the beach.
Well, we've just made our landing on Omaha Beach, and can you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, again, it's a mock-up of Omaha Beach. It is cleaned up and sanitized a bit for the public. There's not what was actually there on D-Day, but it's a pretty close proximity of what you would have seen, the wreckage and just things laying around the beach. Equipment strewn about that nobody had time to pick up. And then you walk up to one of the German gun casemates and sort of see the construction of those and the view of the beach that the Germans had, which was pretty extensive.
Well, I'm happy you left out the machine gun fire.
Indeed.
Mike, I see the weather's changed. Now we're in the winter.
Winter of 1944. It's actually one of the coldest winters on record in Europe. This is the Battle of the Bulge, or also the small town called Aachen. And that was the first town that the 1st Division came into that was inside the German border. The piece of equipment that's iconic for that is the one behind me, is the Sherman tank. The tank itself is on long-term loan from the Army, and the museum was pretty much built around that tank. If the Army ever needs it back, they get it back, and we break our museum to give it back to them.
Has to come through a wall.
Right. This door is from Nuremberg prison, although we don't exactly know who was behind the door. Nuremberg prison is where they housed all of the Nazi leadership at the end of the war during the war crimes tribunals that happened after.
We're not only walking through Europe and Asia, but we're also walking through time. It looks like something that might be familiar to Vietnam veterans.
Absolutely. 1965, the 1st Division deployed out to Vietnam. They were one of the first two full combat divisions sent to Vietnam, the other one being the 1st Cavalry Division. So we picked the iconic image from Vietnam, which is a jungle scenario, and we'll proceed down a jungle path.
Let's do it. I see we've entered into a display illustrating the Iraqi soldier. I know we don't want to talk anything about future wars because we hope there will never be a future war. But what are the plans for the museum in the future?
Well, at some point we would like to expand. We would like to talk about Kosovo and peacekeeping operations. We'd like to talk about current Iraq and Afghanistan. And we'd like to save room because I think unfortunately it's sort of a human condition that we're going to continue with.
Sad to say, yeah.
But we are trying to tell the history as completely as possible.
Well, certainly we're not glorifying war,
Not
but
at all.
we're paying homage to the brave soldiers and sailors and servicemen who gave their all for this country.
And a lot of what we do is, again, just try and familiarize the public with their military, because more and more people don't understand soldiers. And as you know and I know, soldiers are people, just like everybody else. And we want to make the general public feel comfortable with the military that serves them. So at any chance we get, we try and bring soldiers out here from Fort Riley, Kansas. to meet the public. We try and put on public events on patriotic holidays and just do things to get people comfortable with the whole topic of the military.
Well, as we learned through the Vietnam experience, that we certainly do not honor the war, but we honor the people who fought.
Indeed. One of the unique features about Cantigny is the fact that we have 11 tanks out open to the public on the grounds here. A lot of places you can't actually get up and touch these vehicles, but here at Cantigny, the public is welcome to climb on them and to experience them firsthand, right up close and personal. We have 11 tanks spanning from World War I up through Desert Shield and Desert Storm. We have an armored personnel carrier and a number of large-scale artillery pieces that, again, the public is welcome to come up and touch and feel and get familiar with.
I'm Bob Waterman. I'm director of the garden here at Cantigny. If folks aren't really aware of what Cantigny is, as far as the gardens are concerned, the gardens were built 12 years after Robert McCormick passed away. He had left the property to be used for education, recreation, and welfare. So the board of directors decided 12 years after he had passed away to build the gardens. The landscape architect for the gardens is Franz Lipp. And what Franz Lipp designed and built are Midwest display gardens. And what that means is it really is featured in that the trees and the shrubs especially are plants that grow in the Midwest. What we have within Cantigny Gardens are 19 individual gardens. They are in most cases plant specific. We happen to be standing in the 1 acre idea garden, which in itself is broken into 4 pieces. We happen to be standing in the children's garden portion, but there is the herb garden, and as you look around the sensory garden, and over here is the 4-season garden. And therefore they're kind of subject specific. Behind us, or to our left, Bob, is the prairie, which is a 2-year-old prairie, representing plant genome species that are indicative or indigenous to the Chicagoland area.
Okay, you use the term, Bob, genome. Maybe our friends at home may not know exactly what that means.
Sure. What that means is that it is genetic material in these plants that are original, are indigenous to the Chicagoland area. That is, we don't have an Oklahoma prairie, not that there's anything wrong with our neighbors, but it is a Chicagoland prairie, meaning that as settlers are coming into the Chicagoland area, this is the prairie that they would have seen.
What you're saying is all these plants are native to this particular area.
Right.
How far back does the prairie go?
It in size is 3 acres. It's 3 acres in size. And I to be even more specific, there is a 2-acre prairie and a 1-acre savanna. And again, they are both of true plant material or true genetics to the Chicagoland area. So we're really proud of that. That is something new to the estate. Our rose garden, which has 1,200 roses in, of literally hundreds of varieties, and something in the neighborhood of 22 different types of roses are represented in the rose garden.
And there is a Chicago rose.
There
developed
is.
Here.
Yes, it's actually, to say developed, but it's a sport. A sport is a genetic mutation, and it happens all the time in plants, that for one reason or another, and in many cases it might be a virus that caused a genetic mutation within the plant. Chicago Peace was found here at Cantigny in 1967 and is now in production. But its parent is the peace rose. So yes, we're very proud of that too.
And when you use the term virus, that's not a bad thing. We think of viruses as being something bad.
Exactly, things that might bother us as humans. You know, you catch that cold or that virus that causes us aches and pains. And sometimes in plant material, it's a good thing.
That's right.
Frankly, yes. Yeah, exactly.
The virus is what gives you that striped
Yes, in fact, actually, most folks might see that sort of mutation in hosta. Hosta has always been very susceptible to viruses or mutations, and you get variegation. In fact, that's what gives you variegation generally.
Exactly right.
Yeah. They all happen in nature. One thing I did want to mention to you, Bob, in fact, as we were talking about the Idea Garden, is our volunteer staff, which we think the world of. And they play many roles for us. In this Idea Garden, there is a curator. We have a paid employee who has to design this and procure the plant material. Liz O'Mura, who manages our volunteer program and our education programs. But all of Liz's labor, if you will, all the folks who plant it and water it and maintain it, is our volunteer staff. So as much as we call this the Idea Garden, it also could be our volunteer garden. They're very important to us, and anyone viewing the program who might be interested in working in volunteer in any aspect in Cantigny is certainly welcomed. One other thing I did want to mention, we do about 350,000 summer annuals in the garden here at Cantigny, and all of that plant material is grown in our own 18,000 square foot greenhouse, which is very important. That is, we are so self-contained in horticulture here that we don't need to go outside for that expertise. It's all found inside here, and we're very proud of that also. The statue is called the Spirit of Commitment. And what you see in the statue is a World War I soldier on his knee. His arms are intertwined with a World War II soldier who is holding the American flag, and a mother and a daughter. And the concept is actually, the garden was put where it is to allow for quiet reflection. The statue is Spirit of Commitment. The garden is referred to as Reflection Point. And it has benches and a landscape for you to sit in. This is the Upper Bur Oak Garden that Franz Lipp built. I believe it was the third garden that he built, so it puts it back into around the early 1970s that it was constructed. Again, it's just one of 19 gardens, but this garden in particular does three things, and it shows small trees that grow in the Midwest. Again, that Midwest display garden, but they are small trees. If we step outside here, we'll go to 40 feet. We stay inside here, we're about 20 feet. These are trees, small trees that grow in the Midwest. And then as you can see, it shows shrubbery that grows in the Midwest. So those 2 points were important to him. The third concept of this particular garden shows the annual flowers that we grow. Part of the 350,000 that I mentioned that the greenhouse grows for us.
And this is certainly a standing tribute to that period of time.
It is. The gardens were designed in a beautiful fashion, and it's our pleasure to maintain it for years to come.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Laura, for a wonderful visit, and thanks to your staff also. Could you tell our friends at home when they could come visit you here?
Absolutely. Cantigny is open every day from 7 a.m. until sunset. Our coffee shop Birdie's is open from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. And for lunch, Le Jardin is open from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. The museums are free, and if people would like more information on Cantigny to visit, they can go to our website at www.cantigny, that's CANTIGNY.org. Also, school groups can also check out our special area on our website for school group bookings.
Thanks for joining us today here at Cantigny Park in Wheaton, Illinois. We hope you enjoyed visiting the museums and taking part in the interactive displays. We look for you again on Yesterday Today.